What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Saturday edition of On Cue. Rich Quinones is here, and we've got a ton of NFL to dive into. Of course, we're always brought to you by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemens Bridge Road in Woodbine, New Jersey. Check them out online as well. They got the wonderful holiday sales going. So we've got, we're getting to the point now in the NFL season where we separate the boys from the men and help us break it down. Our very good friend Lloyd Vance. You can follow him on X at Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game in Broad Street South as well. And my friend, we are getting down to the nitty gritty. We know some teams are basically still kind of sleeping off the turkey, but we also know there's a handful of teams that are trying to make that deep push into the playoffs once they come around. How are you?
Doing good, Q. It is that playoff push type of time, and we always talk about separating the contenders from the pretenders, and we're starting to see some of these teams step forward. And just the other night, the Dallas Cowboys, that was a must-win game, and you saw that they dug deep. In Seattle, they're fighting for that 6, 7 spot,
Yeah.
so that 6, 7 spot is wide open in the NFC, and it's going to be fun down the stretch to see, is it Seattle? Is it maybe even, a dark horse team like the Green Bay Packers? Do they jump in there?
Yeah, it's a good point. By the way, that game the other night, 41-35, I thought Prescott played well. A little shocked with them throwing it late on third down, but Pete Carroll comes out afterwards talking about too many hankies, too many penalties, 19 flags for 257 penalty yards. Now we know
Crazy.
he's going to get fined. He doesn't care about that. But again, this is just, we've been talking about this for 20 years in the NFL now, right? It's just the consistent need to throw flags on every single solitary play. And then when you don't see one, we're almost like alarmed. We're shocked. I mean, Al Michaels woke up from the Amazon Prime telecast, and he basically was like, just hand it over to the referees and the officials. I say it every year at this time. I'll say it again, and I'm sorry to belabor the point to the audience, but we will get into the playoffs and a team will get screwed because there's bad officiating. It's the nature of the beast in the NFL.
Man, they're unreviewable, Q. So we always need to remember, I always harp on it, that Rams versus Saints game. And everyone knew it was PI. And then they had the talking heads kind of spin it their way
Yep.
that it wasn't PI. Come on.
Sideline play.
And then the Saints uh, got screwed. I
Yeah.
don't mean to put it in a way, but Q, you're right. And these officials, they got to do a better job. They need to make these guys full time. They need to get them training year round. Maybe get some of these guys that are younger that can see the speed of the game and understand what's going on. But too often, the flow of the game is interrupted by these flags. That game the other night, as you said, 17 penalties. I mean, it was almost unwatchable at points. It's like, come on, man. And just let these guys play, because now it's this time of year where these guys should be shining.
I don't think Dallas is going to have a problem moving the football going forward. It's just their secondary was a little suspect. I mean, that's the issue with the Cowboys. They went into that game 5-0 undefeated at home. They're still undefeated, obviously, but they were waxing opponents by 40 something odd points. And here you have a pretty tight game against Seattle. So Dallas has a couple big games coming up. Obviously, the Eagles on the back burner. We'll get to that 425 window, San Fran and Philadelphia. Now, a couple games I want to highlight and go over with you and get your thoughts on. We talked a little bit about these teams now with quarterbacks going down, young head coaches trying to figure things out. You look at the Colts right now, 6-5, pretty much laying a point against Tennessee. The Titans are 4-7. They're pretty much on life support. I think the Titans, their window has shut with Tannehill, with um, Derrick Henry, and maybe even the head coach Mike Rabel. He might be on the outs. He might be on the hot seat. But really, you look at Indianapolis, Richardson goes down and they turn to Gardner Minshew, and he's just quietly going about his business. He's played really well this year under these types of circumstances. Here's a game for Indianapolis. If you're a Colts fan, you're on a little bit of a run here, right? I mean, they had that 3-game losing streak. They've ripped off 4 in a row. I like them in this spot, and they have some winnable games. I mean, if they can get to 9, if 10, they should be able to solidify a spot in the playoffs.
Yes, Q. And the thing about Indianapolis is that everybody's like, okay, they're kind of coming together. They're pretty much a younger team. You have Shane Steichen coming there from the Eagles, and you thought, okay, maybe with Richardson, it'd take a year to kind of build this thing up. But they're in the mix with Gardner Minshew, surprisingly, of all people. Minshew we know is a capable backup, but he stepped in there and he's doing a nice job in terms of managing the offense, not turning the football over. You have Michael Pittman Jr. on the outside, who's becoming one of those elite type receivers, making big plays. It is unfortunate, Q, that he did lose Jonathan Taylor to a thumb injury that may be big here, but Zach Moss was playing very well for
Yeah.
them before that. They're going to slide him back in there. We talked about earlier, Quentin Nelson, one of the best blockers in the game today at the guard position, so they're going to probably run behind him. Minshew, this team is now at 6-5, and they're only 2 games behind Jacksonville, who's playing on Monday night. So this is a big spot for them. Tennessee downtrodden, as you were saying. Will Levis, he's in there, young quarterback, ups and downs. I see him making a game-changing type bad play, and the Colts defense, which is very underrated, kind of making a play that kind of turns this game around, and they win this one in a close one. So I'll go with the Colts in this one.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they go on the road. It's a tough test, but ultimately, this is the game where if you want to make the playoffs, you win a game like this against a bad team. All right. I'm looking at the Lions and the Saints right now. The Lions get it. Listen, they got humbled on Thanksgiving against Green Bay. The New Orleans Saints, and I know Lions are only laying 4.5 here, 5, but the New Orleans Saints at 5-6. I thought maybe the acquisition of Carr would kind of jumpstart the offense. It really has not been the case. They have been a very disappointing team to watch, and I know they've had a couple injuries, and I know they had a couple issues in the secondary, but their offense, I mean, if you go back to some of these games that they lost, 17 points, 9 points, 13 points, all right, 24 against Jacksonville, but they gave up 31, and then they scored 19 against Minnesota and a really bad loss against a bad Atlanta team where they only scored 15 points. I thought really Carr was going to be the answer in that division, the X factor, get him over the hump. And thus far, 10 touchdowns, 5 picks. I mean, that's, we can talk about the ratio, but the bottom line is I expected at least 25 touchdown passes from Carr this year.
Yeah, you thought he'd be that veteran leader to kind of come in there and fix Pete Carmichael's offense. And yes, they're another team that's had some kind of injuries. They're not going to have Rashid Shaheed in this game. And Chris Olave's game time decision with that concussion. So, but when you watch Carr, he's just so inconsistent,
Yeah.
Q. And it's almost like, okay, well, they have Jameis Winston there who's just as inconsistent. Is this a big enough upgrade above him? And it's been nice earlier about midseason. They had Taysom Hill coming in there, and he was doing a good job with the gadget plays and et cetera. But last week, he had a huge fumble in the red zone that kind of turned the game for the Saints. And you talk about their score differentials, their defense is done a nice job underneath Dennis Allen. But this offense is not clicking, particularly in the red zone. They're not getting it done. So this is a playoff eliminator type game. Detroit, their offense is second in the NFL in terms of yards, 405 yards a game. So they can put up some yards in a game. The only problem with them is their defense under Aaron Glenn is allowing too many points.
Yeah.
So this is another game. It's back and forth. I think the Lions may be a slight favorite in this one, but I think I'm going to go with the Lions in this one. I think Jared Goff is ready to make some game-changing plays. He had 3 fumbles last week. He's got to protect the football.
Yeah, they're laying close to 4.5, 5. It'll probably close at that number. But, number aside, when you look at this game, the X's and O's, the Lions could have made life a lot more easier if they just would have won that game against Green Bay, because they are kind of still vying for home field advantage in the playoffs. I do like them in this game. I just think their offense, they might give up 25. This could be the week that the New Orleans Saints offense breaks out, but the Lions offense should carry them more. I don't want to get into this game, but I want to make a point. Atlanta and the Jets, both these offenses stink. And I'm just wondering if the Jets lose this game and they're not even competitive and they lose, say, a 25-6 type of game, this Rodgers talk now, right? He's coming back. He's backtracking. He's backpedaling. He's going to come. I said this a week ago. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I think it's selfish. There's no incentive. There's no need for him to come back at all. I think he's kind of ruined this franchise if you really think about it, because he is running the franchise. period. He's running the franchise. He's not going to be available. He's down after 4 snaps to start the series, to start the season with that offensive series. Every time he talks on McAfee, and I get it, he's getting paid $1 million, so go and enjoy it and talk. But every time he talks, it's almost like a tease to the Jet fan and the Jet faithful. And I'm wondering if the brass has to probably be sitting back saying, you know what? We know he's not going to play. Like, no doctor in their right mind is going to allow him to go out there. I feel as though that needs to be talked about more, because I don't see any doctor worth their weight in gold, especially if you're working for the franchise, right? That they're going to just sit there and say, yeah, man, we're giving you the pass. You're good to go. And hey, you're going to take a couple hits here and there. We'll see how the Achilles, we'll see how you move around. But I just don't see anyone doing that, because if he does go back out there, re-injures himself, then how do you, Robert Saleh, he's going to get fired. Like, I don't believe they keep Robert Saleh. They retain him after the season. But my question is, if they go out and they lay another egg offensively, can you see them making a change?
They could. They could. Who would it be though? Do they really have anybody on that staff that could
Just throw
take over and
Hackett
turn?
up as head coach.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but this team is they're 4-7, as you were talking about, and so many difficulties with this team. Talk about their third down efficiency. They're 24% on third downs, which is last in the National Football League.
It's
That shows you
amazing
the
they can't convert a
inefficiency of
third
this team.
down.
They cannot convert third downs. In the red zone, they can't get touchdowns. You see the obvious frustration on Wilson and the rest of at the receiver, the rest of those guys. They're just not happy. And as you said, they're just exacerbating this situation with this soap opera with Aaron Rodgers. They open his 21-day practice window with him. And yes, he's cleared to go to practice
Right.
and walk around and everything. But in terms of I think he'll be 40 in a couple weeks. 40-year-old quarterback trying to come back from Achilles with a team that's going nowhere quick, because the AFC is way more competitive. That seventh spot, you're going to have 10 wins to get to that seventh spot. So there's only 6 games left. They would have to basically run the table,
Not
which
happening.
it's just not going to happen. And Aaron Rodgers, why put yourself in harm's way? Because as you said, change is coming with the New York Jets. Salah's done. Their GM, he's Joe Douglas. He may be in trouble too as well. So this is a big spot for them. Atlanta, very inconsistent as you talk about. Desmond Ritter, he's got to protect the football. They have 18 turnovers this season. So he's a guy that's up and down, very inconsistent, as we were saying. Better lean on Bijan Robinson, because I think he can get it done. And as you said, if they're embarrassed enough, some of these pink slips may be coming around the NFL this week.
Offensively, their last win, they scored 13. Their last 4 losses, 6, 12, 6, and 13. I mean, go back to the Giants game. They
Sure.
did not convert one third down in that game. It's really bad. I don't like this game at all. I mean, I have no desire to even watch this game, to be quite honest with you. I think it's going to be a lousy football game. I feel bad for that 1 o'clock window in New York to endure it. Again, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029, a game, Broad Street South, kind enough to join a Saturday edition of On Cue. I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Don't forget, follow us on social media, YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. You've got the Dolphins, Commanders, the Cardinals, the Steelers. Nothing really stands out for me in those games, to be quite honest. I mean, I still think the Steelers at 7-4 are a fraud 7-4. Their offense is still kind of on par with the Jets. Miami, maybe you look at this game, 9.5. The Commanders right now, they had an opportunity to make it a competitive season. They got rid of Jack Del Rio. We talked about that a little bit last week on BYP. Now you got Ron Rivera. There's talk maybe that Eric Bieniemy once again is not going to have an opportunity if Rivera gets fired to become a head coach with Washington. I think there's going to be a ridiculous amount of movement. You're already starting to hear rumors: Harbaugh, Gruden, Belichick. I don't, at this point, even if Washington ran the table and they finished 9-8, there's absolutely no way you retain the head coach and Ron Rivera. You just can't do it.
Ron Rivera is in trouble, and he knows it. And getting rid of Jack Del Rio is a stopgap move. Yet they were embarrassed by Dallas on Thanksgiving, so it was very reactionary. And everybody I talked to, as you said, Q, it's an organizational problem, not just one coach. So it Joshua Harris is there. He's bought this team. He's got all eyes on it. And
Yep.
as any businessman, he's evaluating everything, and then he's going to pull the trigger. And unfortunately, Miami. Miami loves to eat up on these cupcakes, and that's what Washington is at this point. And they made too many mistakes with Sam Howell in terms of turnovers, and I can't block for him. So I expect Miami to win this one big, and you're going to see Tyreek Hill have a field day running through that secondary that's had problems covering, and Miami will look like they're a contender again, but they really have to beat somebody that's worthy. But Miami's going to keep marching into the playoffs, and they're at Washington, they have Tennessee, they have the Jets. That Dallas game is going to be interesting in Week 16. Then they're at Baltimore,
Okay.
and then they finish up with Buffalo. So
11 wins.
maybe we'll see at the end if Miami's a true contender. But
Yeah.
right now they're going to fatten their stats up on these bad teams.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, 11 wins, that should be enough to win the AFCs because we're seeing what's going on with New England, the Jets, and obviously the Bills with some issues off the field. Denver and the Texans. I looked at this game for a while now, and, I'm a big fan of what they're doing in Houston with D'Amico Ryans and Stroud. He's a player, but we saw a little bit of the pressure get to him last week in that loss against Jacksonville. You've got Denver now, who's been on a nice little run, and as much as I've killed Russell Wilson, his touchdown to interception ratio 20-4. He's really playing well. He's had 5 straight games where he's thrown for 1 touchdown, no picks, mind you, no turnovers. I think this is the game where Denver starts to flex their muscle a little bit defensively. And again, I know Houston's laying a field goal in this game at home, but I look at Denver and I just look at this team right now, 5-game winning streak, hottest team in the NFL. They're going to get to Stroud early in this game, and I want to see how the young kid responds. I think now when you get to late November, early December, meaningful football, it's different when you're a rookie quarterback. I'm not going to say the kid breaks this weekend. I think he bends a little bit, but this is the week I can see maybe 2 bad picks by C.J. Stroud and that offensive Denver carrying them to a W.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because as you're saying, C.J. Stroud has had that magic carpet ride at certain points of his
Yeah.
season, and he's had 19 touchdowns. He has 5 interceptions. Most of those interceptions are recent. So I expect a high scoring game in this one. Houston is averaging 23 points per game. It's going to be interesting in how Denver deploys Patrick Surtain the second to kind of, cover some Tank Dell and some of those other guys and see if they can't run free. So Denver, as you're saying, on this 5-game winning streak, they've had 16 takeaways. So they have been opportunistic, and you're right. They're going to try to get that pressure rate on Stroud and have him make mistakes. Been back and forth in this one because it's a playoff type eliminator. I think I'm going to go with the older quarterback, though, and Russell Wilson. As you said, he's starting to run the ball a little bit more, moving the chains, and then he's being very smart with football. So I expect Denver to win this one in a close one. This may be one of those entertaining games like we saw last week with the Eagles and the Bills, where last team that has a football wins.
The one thing I noticed over the years with Denver, you can pick and choose your spots when you can run against them. Texans come in averaging about 3.7 on the ground, Singletary right around 4.1, but they're not breaking long runs. The longest run of a Texans running back this year is 22 yards. So they're really not getting to that second level where you can really start to wear down the defenses, especially in the fourth quarter. But I think Denver does enough offensively, and their defense should, again, carry them. All right. The only reason I'm bringing up Carolina is because we saw the debacle. We talked a little bit about Frank Reich. Now the question is, what head coach, what potential candidate wants to take over this team? Do we buy into this? You get rid of the guy, fresh locker room, Antonio Pierce. We've seen it, right? You make a head coaching change, they go on a winning streak, they win a game here and there. If Tampa Bay has any inclination of trying to make the playoffs, there's absolutely no way you stub your toe at home against a 1-10 Panthers team that, quite frankly, I think that firing was the last gut punch. I just don't believe this team responds. I think they're done.
Yeah, Q, They may not win another game the rest of the season in Carolina. And it was interesting because at the end of last season, we were talking about, okay, they started moving in the right direction. They had Steve Wilkes there. He
Hmm.
did a pretty good job as interim coach. And then Tepper hires Frank Reich. You think he's the guy and he's going to give him 3-4 years to clean this thing up. Obviously, some kind of personality conflict there. And David Tepper, one of these high-powered billionaire businessmen, he wants to run his business the way he wants to. Fires the coach and you're right. Typically, you get that jump from an interim guy, and they clean the locker room out. But this locker room has way too much to clean up. There's just guys that are not. I'm not saying they're quitting, but they're just not putting forth that kind of effort that you would expect from a pro. So, this is an opportunity for Tampa Bay at home at 5-6 to kind of get into that range to compete for a very bad NFC South division, because let's not forget they're only like a game behind the Falcons. So I expect Tampa Bay to win this one. Mike Evans is on the verge of having his 10th consecutive 1,000-yard season. Baker Mayfield has got to protect the football in this
Yeah.
one, but I think the Tampa wins this one at home.
Uh, they've got Tampa has Carolina twice. They have them Sunday and then they close out the season. In between, they have Atlanta, New Orleans, and Green Bay, plus Jacksonville. I don't see them beating Jacksonville, especially if Jacksonville's vying for the division. Jacksonville's just a better team. But you said they're 5-6 right now. I mean, if they can get it, I feel as though if you can get to that elusive ninth win with some of these divisions, you have an opportunity to win a division and get into the playoffs. They're going to need a new quarterback. I mean, that's just I pulled it up right now. You've got Atlanta, New Orleans, Tampa, 5-6, 5-6, 4-7. So your guess is as good as mine. But Baker Mayfield is just a bridge. He really is. He's just a bridge quarterback. Uh, it's, I mean, Kyle Trask, John Wolford, they're going to stick with Mayfield, who I like, but he's not
Right.
going to be that long-term answer. So to your point, as you illustrated, big opportunity here for Tampa to kind of stockpile some wins as the season's drawn to an end. And then listen, if they get in with 9, that's because they won the division. All right,
Yeah.
the Browns and the Rams, you got Flacco starting. I just suspect that they'll keep it very simple. Use that defense to try to win this game. The Rams have been very inconsistent all season long. Here's a question for you. Do you think the Rams, their window, they got the Super Bowl win. Their window is pretty much shut after the fact. They sold their soul with all those contracts and high price players and free agents and trades and signings and the Stafford issue. Uh, let's just say they finish 6-11, 7-10 this year. Do you think they move on from Matthew Stafford?
Yeah, okay. I thought you were going to say McVay. No, I think McVay comes back, and McVay, he's always evaluating these quarterbacks and trying to get better.
Yeah.
And yeah, at this point, Stafford, he's very inconsistent. He's older. He's 35, 36 years old, and he's throwing interceptions. And there's enough there if they brought somebody else in that took care of the football that they could do some damage. I expect the Rams will lean on Kyron Williams in this one. That young man played very well last week in terms of being a dual threat coming out of the backfield, running and catching the football. But the key thing, obviously, is this is a tough matchup for the Rams in terms of this Cleveland defense. They're only allowing about 17 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that Myles Garrett and the rest of the guys, they're going to be coming after Stafford, and he's got to protect the football. So I've been back and forth on this one. Flacco, I saw him when he was here in Philadelphia as the backup, and he had to step in. He just didn't seem like he had much left. So I'm going to go out on a limb here. I say the Rams win this one, Q, and
Mm.
they continue to fight for that 6-7 spot in the NFC that we've been talking about. But this is going to be an interesting game because both quarterbacks are old, and you don't know what to expect from them.
All right, 2 more. Not too, enamored with the Monday night, but the Chiefs and the Packers will close with the Eagles and the 49ers. Chiefs and the Packers. Packers can go get blown out, but yet in 2-3 weeks, no one's going to remember that game because they've got winnable games coming up. I look at this Chiefs team and I still think that it's a flawed team. They're too reliant on Pacheco and Mahomes and Kelsey. We saw the drops. This is a game I would be very weary if you're a Chiefs fan. This is not a gimme game. You look at Kansas City, you look at their games coming up. Obviously, for Kansas City, they want to win the division, but they've got Green Bay, Buffalo, a bad New England team, a hit or miss Vegas team, Cincinnati, and the Chargers. They can go on a little bit of run here and kind of silence the critics. But man, I'm telling you right now, that Sunday 8:20 NBC Sunday Night Football, that's going to be a tough spot for them. Now, their schedule, again, they have 3 of their final 6, I believe, on the road. But it starts in Green Bay. And I know Kansas City's a banged up team right now, but I'm still waiting for that 35-point explosion. And I don't really know if we're going to see it against Green Bay. I think Green Bay is better than people give them credit for. And I also think Love is a better quarterback than maybe you and I and the talking heads have proclaimed him to be. I know a lot of people were down on him, but the kid's winning a couple games. And I thought going on the road on Thanksgiving in a hostile environment and playing as well as he played against Detroit is going to give him a boatload of confidence.
Yes, it's interesting because which Jordan Love is going to show up because during his 2-game winning streak, as you're talking about, including that Thanksgiving game, he's been pinpoint. He's been protecting the football, and it's interesting because the Chiefs got that playoff push they're doing, and you figure, okay, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid, and these offensive weapons like Kelsey, but their defense has been carrying today with Steve Spagnuolo. Right now, they're only allowing 16 and a half points per game, third in the NFL. That defense is doing a very nice job, Chris Jones, and them getting heat on the quarterback, and Jordan Love. We'll see. That line's a little beat up. Bakhtiari has not played this season, and if you get pressure on him, he's not going to be able to get the ball out of his hands. Aaron Jones not playing in this one, so they may not have their running game to lean on. I expect KC, who typically has not played in Green Bay that often, to kind of come in there and try to right the ship. But Rice has got to do a good job, as he's been doing the last couple weeks at the receiver position. We know drops have been their problem. They have 27 to lead the NFL.
All right, last game, big one. Could be the game of the year in the NFL, certainly the game of the weekend. Rematch of the NFC Championship. San Francisco on the road, laying 3 against a 10-1, let's say, very good, but yet the benefit of a couple gifts here and there. Philadelphia Eagles squad, who will listen, all eyes will be on the TV at 425, Fox national window. I've gone back and forth, and I look at last year, and Purdy gets hurt early, and they just never recover. He's played well this year, really well. You can throw him into the MVP conversation. We always look at trends, right? And the Eagles are a team that's leaking a little bit of oil. We saw it against Kansas City, where Kansas City had to drop late. We saw it against Buffalo, where, again, they had to come from behind, and the flags played a part in that. But Hurts is still a very good quarterback. He's an exceptional quarterback. I think for me, if the Eagles can control the line of scrimmage, and this is a game again where I believe you have to get Swift into the offense, into the flow early. You can't wait till the second quarter to have him start ripping off touches. I mean, he's got to get his 15 to 25. That's going to open things up. I don't know if I give the edge. I don't know if I give the edge to the 49ers when it comes to their secondary trying to shut down these Eagles' offensive weapons. But I'll tell you this, I give the edge to San Francisco's offense against that Eagles secondary. See, that worries me. So I think it's got to be in the trenches, ball control, pick and choose your spots. But man, if San Fran starts exploiting those corners and those DBs like we've seen over the last several weeks, it could be a long night for the Philadelphia Eagles. I've been going back and forth. To me, I don't want to hedge, but I think this is a last possession type of game. I also think there's this motivating factor with the 49ers. They believe they were the better team last year on the road. Unforeseen injury with Purdy going down and not having a viable option at quarterback. To me, the revenge factor, the trash talking, all that, I think the 49ers win this game late, and it could be on a field goal.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting because we've talked over and over again about how fortunate the Philadelphia Eagles have been. The ball has been bouncing their way. They are 10-1, but a lot of question marks out there. That their defense is allowing 256 passing yards per game, 29th in the National Football League. So you can move the football against them. And then you're talking about on our side, Brock Purdy is completing 70% of his passes. So when he has that clean pocket and everything's on rhythm, he can do some damage. And It's going to be interesting, as you said. The offensive lines are going to be the key in this game. The Philadelphia Eagles, you're going to have to Lane Johnson, game time decision.
Yep.
Driscoll did an okay job last week, but going against Nick Bosa and Chase Young, that's going to be a very tough matchup for him. And we know that they love to get pressure. Steve Wilkes now is their defensive coordinator there. They have 33 sacks, and they have 15 of those sacks in the last 3 games, which they've all won. So I'm with you. This is going to be a back and forth game. Uh, Whoever turns it over the most is going to lose in this one. Obviously, I know that's pretty uh, chalk, but the Eagles are in the bottom half in takeaways. They only have 14 takeaways, so they're not getting as many takeaways as they did last season. Now, if you talk about a last-second possession type of thing, the Eagles do have the edge in terms of the kicker. Elliott is 19 and 11, 19 of 21 this season. We saw last week that 59-yarder in the rain, in the fog, and everything. Great kick. And the 49ers young kicker has kind of struggled at points. So, but I'm with you. I think in the end, the Niners will get their revenge in this one because I still think the Eagles are not going to take this conference and run away with it. I still think there's a lot more to be said, particularly this game and against Dallas next week.
Yeah, I don't know how much plays into losing Brock Purdy's 6 offensive snap and a 31-7 NFC Championship blowout. Like, we know they're pissed. Samuel Ayuk, they're talking trash. Reddick said earlier this week, "Hey man, you know what? We play. I mean, at the end of the day, talk is cheap. You got to play the game. Bradbury, Slay, everyone going back and forth. I know they'll hopefully get Goddard back, but you mentioned Elaine Johnson. That's huge. I think their offense will be okay. What concerns me is, especially even if San Francisco will chip or not chip, this is a game where Christian McCaffrey is probably going to have 135 total yards, right? He's going to catch, his player prop 4.5 receiving, 4.5 receptions. He should hit that one easily in the first quarter. Like, I believe Purdy wants to get the ball out fast in space, little dump offs, drops, screens, wheel routes, just to get McCaffrey going in space. And that's how the Eagles give up chunks of yardage like that. And then we see the big hits, the long hitters. So that would be my concern. If they start to get to Purdy early and the offensive line shows cracks for San Francisco, it plays right in the Phillies' hands. I don't see this game being up and down, a phonetical pace. I think every possession is going to be very key. Special teams, as you mentioned, could play a role in this one. I think it will. I guess I'm trying to buy in or subscribe to this theory where the 49ers are so pissed off because they thought they had a legit shot to get to the Super Bowl, and you lose your quarterback 6 offensive snaps in. You're not going to overcome that. So now there should be, here's the thing, no excuses now. None. Because for a year they've complained about the officiating, the injuries. We saw the Eagles complain in the Super Bowl. Like, now it's talk is cheap, and I still believe the X factor to me is going to be Christian McCaffrey, but I also think the X factor for the Eagles is going to be Swift. If they don't run the football, if they don't get a balanced attack to open things up, they're not going to win this football game. And for that reason, I'm going to go San Francisco 31 and the Eagles 27. I'll give you an exact
We
score.
kind of agree that they're going to win it. And McCaffrey, as you said, he leads the NFL in rushing.
Yep.
They're going to try to get him going. Trent Williams is one of the best blockers out there. And then don't forget about George Kittle. I think this may be the George Kittle game because the Eagles have had trouble over the middle with their safeties and linebackers covering tight ends. So they got to cover Kittle in this one. And it's a prove it type game. And that's what you're talking about. This is a heavyweight clash. Both these teams want to prove they're the biggest dog on the block. And we're going to see Sunday late afternoon who can get it done.
It'll be a good one, 425. Fox has it, national window, Olsen and Burkhardt on the call. He, of course, is Lloyd Vance. Follow him on X at Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. 1029 The Game, part of the Broad Street South Network, and always kind enough to join us on BYP and, of course, on Q. Bundle up, strap on the chin strap. Enjoy a little college football today. Enjoy the NFL games, and we'll do it again on Tuesday when we recap everything. Appreciate you, pal.
You look forward to it. Thanks for having me on.